The wind carried dust and the smell of burnt sage across the valley floor, whipping through the broken fence posts that marked the outer edge of Hadley Ranch. Wren Voss stood at the property line with everything she owned tied in a wool blanket slung across her back: 2 dresses, a tin cup, a knife with a loose handle, and a leather journal so worn the pages threatened to scatter if she opened it too quickly. She looked like every other drifter who wandered through cattle country looking for work. Thin, weathered, unremarkable. The kind of person you'd glance past without a second thought. That was intentional. Wren had learned years ago that being invisible kept you alive. Being remembered got you questions. Questions led to connections, and connections meant someone might eventually trace the name Voss back to a burned-out homestead 3 territories west, to a father buried without ceremony, to land stolen in broad daylight while the law looked the other way. So she moved, worked, disappeared, repeated. Hadley Ranch was supposed to be just another stop. 3 months of kitchen work, enough pay to get through winter, then gone before anyone learned her real name. But the moment she crossed that fence line, something shifted. The ranch sprawled across the valley like something carved from stubbornness and sweat. Main house, bunkhouse, barn, paddocks, all built from rough timber and river stone. Functional. No wasted effort. The kind of place that survived because it refused to quit, not because it was loved. Wren walked the dirt road toward the main house, her boots kicking up small clouds with each step. A few ranch hands looked up from their work near the corral, measuring her the way men measured everything out here, calculating whether she'd be useful or trouble. She kept her eyes forward. The main house sat at the center of it all, 2 stories of weathered wood and stone chimney, windows that caught the afternoon light like tired eyes. Wren climbed the porch steps and knocked, footsteps inside. Heavy, deliberate. The door opened. Fletcher Hadley stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile years ago. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbows, hands stained with what looked like axle grease. Gray streaked his dark hair at the temples. He looked her over once, quick and thorough. "You the cook Marcus sent? If you're still hiring. You know anything about feeding 15 men 3 times a day? I know how to keep them from complaining." Fletcher's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "That'll do. Pays room and board plus $8 a month. Work starts before dawn, ends after supper. Sundays you get the afternoon. Any problem with that?" "No." "One more thing." His voice dropped and something in his expression shifted, harder, like a door closing. "My son lives upstairs, East Room. He's not part of your work. You don't go in that room. You don't talk to him. You don't acknowledge he exists. Understood?" Wren met his eyes. There was pain there, buried under years of refusing to show it. "Understood." "Good. Kitchen's through the back. Maria's waiting to show you around. She'll get you settled." He stepped aside and Wren walked into Hadley Ranch carrying everything she owned and a rule she had no intention of keeping. Maria was 50-something, gray-haired, with hands that never stopped moving and eyes that missed nothing. She'd been cooking for the ranch since before Fletcher's wife died, before the accident that put his son in that upstairs room, before any of the ranch hands currently working the property had arrived. "You'll sleep here," Maria said, opening a small room off the kitchen. Narrow bed, washstand, single window overlooking the yard. "Breakfast is 5:30, coffee first, then biscuits, bacon, eggs, lunch is noon, whatever's quick. Supper's 6. You'll learn what they like and what they won't eat. Don't waste food. Don't burn the coffee. Don't go upstairs." Wren set her bundle on the bed. "He already told me about his son." "Then I don't need to tell you twice." Maria's voice softened slightly. "Fletcher's a good man. Hard, but fair. He's been through enough. Don't make his life harder." "I'm here to cook." "Good. Keep it that way." Maria left and Wren unpacked in silence. 2 dresses hung on the wall pegs, tin cup on the washstand, knife under the pillow. The journal went into the drawer out of sight. She stood at the window and looked out across the ranch. Men were bringing horses in from the pasture, their voices carrying across the yard, rough laughter, casual cursing, the easy rhythm of people who'd worked together long enough to forget they were separate. Then she heard it. Faint. From somewhere above. A sound like furniture scraping across a wooden floor. Then nothing. Wren's hands tightened on the windowsill. She'd heard that sound before, years ago, in another house, another life. The sound of someone trying to move when their body wouldn't cooperate. The first week passed in a blur of early mornings and aching feet. Wren learned the rhythms of the ranch, who wanted extra biscuits, who took coffee black, who complained about everything but ate every bite. She learned that Fletcher took his meals alone in his office, that Maria had a daughter in Denver she hadn't seen in 3 years, that the ranch hands played poker every Saturday and argued about it until Tuesday. She learned the route to the well, the trick to the stove's temperamental damper, which floorboards creaked in the kitchen. And she learned the layout of the upstairs. Not by going up, she wouldn't risk that, not yet, but by listening. The east room sat directly above the kitchen. Morning and night she heard movement up there. Not walking, something else. Dragging, shifting, the creak of a chair, the thump of something dropped. Fletcher went up twice a day, morning and evening. He'd climb those stairs like a man walking to his own execution, slow and inevitable. He'd stay 20 minutes. Sometimes she heard voices muffled through the floorboards, sometimes just silence. Then he'd come back down, lock the door behind him, and return to running the ranch like nothing existed beyond fence lines and cattle prices. On the 8th day, Wren broke her first rule. She went to the library. The ranch had a small collection, mostly agricultural manuals, a few novels, some old newspapers. She wasn't looking for entertainment. She was looking for information. It took her 2 hours of searching, but she found it. A single paragraph in a 3-year-old newspaper, bottom of page 6. Local rancher's son injured in riding accident. Gideon Hadley, 14, thrown from horse during storm. Doctor reports paralysis from waist down, prognosis uncertain. Nothing after that. No updates, no recovery, no funeral notice, just silence. Wren folded the newspaper and put it back exactly where she'd found it. That night, she opened her father's journal. The leather was soft under her fingers, familiar. She'd carried it for 7 years, ever since they'd buried him in unmarked ground, and she'd fled with nothing but the clothes on her back and this record of everything he'd known. Elias Voss had been a healer, not the kind people trusted in towns. He had no degree, no official standing, but he'd learned from people the universities ignored, methods that predated medical schools, techniques that worked when nothing else would. He'd taught her all of it, and one of those techniques was written on page 47 in her father's careful handwriting. For paralysis of limb when injury has not severed the cord, warmth, movement, and patient pressure. The body remembers what the mind has forgotten. Give it reason to remember. Wren closed the journal and stared at the ceiling, at the room directly above her where a boy who should be walking sat trapped in a chair. She thought about her father's voice. The worst thing you can do for someone in pain is leave them alone with it. She thought about Fletcher's order. You don't go in that room. She thought about $8 a month and a bed in the kitchen and the careful invisibility that had kept her alive this long. Then she thought about the sound of furniture scraping across the floor, over and over, the sound of someone fighting a body that wouldn't fight back. Wren made her decision. The next morning, Fletcher left for town before dawn. Supply Run wouldn't be back until late. Maria took the afternoon to visit a sick friend 2 ranches over. The hands were out working the north pasture. Wren was alone in the house. She finished the breakfast cleanup, hands moving automatically while her mind ran through every step of what she was about to do. She could still stop, could walk away, could keep herself safe and invisible and untangled from other people's suffering. Instead, she heated water. She gathered clean towels, the lavender oil Maria kept for headaches, the tin of dried rosemary from the pantry. She arranged everything on a tray, careful, deliberate. No room for second-guessing. Then she climbed the stairs. The hallway upstairs was dim, narrow, 3 doors. 2 stood open, empty bedrooms thick with dust. The third was closed. Wren knocked. Silence. She knocked again. "My name is Wren. I'm the new cook. I'd like to talk to you." More silence. Then, faint. "Go away." A boy's voice, rough with disuse, angry. "I will," Wren said, "in a minute. But first I want to show you something." "I said go away." "Your father told me not to come up here. He was very clear about it. So I'm breaking his rule right now. That means whatever I'm about to say must be important enough to risk my job. Don't you want to know what it is? Longer silence this time. Then, doors unlocked. Ren turned the handle. The room was larger than she expected, but it felt small. Curtains drawn, air stale, everything arranged for efficiency rather than comfort. A bed, a desk, a wheelchair near the window. And in that wheelchair, backlit by the thin light filtering through the curtains, sat Gideon Hadley. 17, maybe. Thin in the way of people who'd been strong once and lost it. Dark hair, his father's jawline, eyes that looked like they'd stopped expecting anything good a long time ago. He stared at her. Who the hell are you? I told you, Ren, the cook. Cook's not supposed to be up here. I know. So leave. In a minute. Ren set the tray on the desk. How long have you been in that chair? 3 years? Why? How much can you move? Gideon's expression hardened. What kind of question is that? The relevant kind. Can you move your legs at all? No. Not even a little? No, that's what paralyzed means. Are you stupid? Ren pulled a chair over and sat down across from him, close enough that he couldn't ignore her. I don't think you're paralyzed. I think your body forgot how to move, and everyone around you decided that was permanent. Gideon laughed, sharp, bitter. You're insane. Maybe, but I'm also right. She leaned forward. 3 years ago, you were thrown from a horse. You hit the ground hard enough to damage your spine. The doctor said you'd never walk again, and everyone believed him. Your father built you this room. The ranch learned to work around you, and you spent 3 years in this chair convincing yourself the doctor was right. He was right. Was he? Ren gestured at the wheelchair. Or did everyone just stop trying? Get out. Listen to me. I said get out, Gideon's voice cracked. You don't know anything about me. You don't know what it's like. You don't know. He stopped, breathing hard, hands gripping the wheelchair arms. Ren waited. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, tired. Every doctor who's looked at me said the same thing. The damage is permanent. I'm never walking again. So why are you here telling me lies? Because I watched my father heal people everyone else had given up on. Ren reached for the tray. And because I know the difference between can't and won't. Your body won't move because it's forgotten how. That's not the same as can't. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to work. She soaked a towel in the warm water. I'm going to touch your leg now. If you want me to stop, say so. Gideon went very still. Why? Because I need to see something. She pressed the warm towel against his right calf, through the fabric of his pants. Waited. Watched his face. Nothing. She moved her hand, applying gentle pressure to specific points, the places her father had taught her, the nerve pathways that carried signals from brain to muscle. Still nothing. Then she pressed just below his knee, firm and steady, and Gideon's entire body jerked. Did you feel that? Ren asked. Gideon stared at his leg like he'd never seen it before. I don't know. Maybe. Something. Not maybe. Yes or no? Yes. His voice barely audible. Yes, I felt something. Ren sat back. That's where we start. Over the next week, Ren developed a routine. Early morning, before anyone was awake, she'd heat water and prepare the oils. After breakfast cleanup, when the house was empty, she'd slip upstairs. 20 minutes. That's all they had before someone might return. 20 minutes to work muscles that hadn't been used in 3 years. To apply pressure and warmth to nerves that had gone silent. To push Gideon's body past the point where his mind said it was impossible. The first few days, nothing happened beyond that initial response. Ren would work his legs, applying the techniques her father had taught her, systematic, patient, relentless, while Gideon gritted his teeth and tried not to hope. This is stupid, he said on the 4th day. Probably. You're wasting your time. Also possible. Why are you doing this? Ren pressed her thumb into the muscle along his shin, steady pressure, counting silently. Because no one else is. On the 5th day, his left foot twitched. Gideon's entire body went rigid. Did you see that? I saw it. Do it again. Ren repeated the pressure. Nothing. Why didn't it? Patience. Ren adjusted her position, tried a different angle. Your body's relearning. It's not going to be consistent yet. They kept working, 15 minutes in, his foot twitched again. Then his toes curled, just slightly. Gideon made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Easy," Ren said. "Don't celebrate yet. This is the beginning, not the end." I felt it. I actually felt my foot move. "I know. You don't understand. For 3 years, nothing. And now—" He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his eyes weren't empty. "Why didn't anyone else try this?" "Because they believed the doctor. But you don't. I believe what I see, and I see someone who can move. You just need to remember how." By the second week, the sessions had become the center of both their days. Gideon started asking questions about her father's methods, about other people she'd seen recover, about what was possible. Ren answered what she could and deflected what she couldn't. "Where'd you learn this?" Gideon asked one morning while she worked his right knee. "My father." "He a doctor?" "No." "Then what?" "A healer. Different thing." "How?" Ren paused, choosing her words carefully. "Doctors learn from books and schools. My father learned from people who'd been healing long before there were medical schools. Different knowledge. Older." "Did it work?" "Sometimes. Not always, but more often than people expected." Gideon was quiet for a moment. "What happened to him?" "He died." "How?" "Fire." The word came out flat, final. Gideon heard the door closing in her voice and didn't push. They worked in silence for a while, then, "Can you feel that?" "Yeah, pins and needles. Like my leg fell asleep and it's waking up." "Good. That's the nerves reconnecting." Ren moved to his other leg. "It's going to hurt more before it gets better." "I don't care." "You will. Pain means your body's remembering, but it also means you're going to want to stop." "I won't stop." "Everyone says that." "I mean it." Gideon's voice hardened. "I've spent 3 years stuck in this chair while everyone looked at me like I was already dead. You think I'm going to stop now because it hurts? You think I care about pain?" Ren looked at him, really looked. Saw the determination there, fierce and desperate. Saw the kid who'd spent 3 years trapped and was willing to do anything, endure anything, for a chance at freedom. She recognized that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror often enough. "All right," she said quietly. "Then we keep going." The third week brought real progress. Gideon could flex both feet, could bend his left knee slightly, could feel pressure, temperature, pain, all the sensations that had been absent for so long. The work got harder, more intense. Ren pushed him further each session, demanding movement where there had been stillness, forcing his body to remember patterns it had abandoned. Gideon never complained. Sometimes he'd go white with effort, sweat beading on his forehead, jaw locked tight, but he never asked her to stop. "Try again," Ren would say, and he'd try. One morning, while working his right leg, Ren said, "I need you to do something." "What?" "Push against my hand." She placed her palm against the sole of his foot. "Push. Hard as you can." Gideon closed his eyes, concentrating. His whole body tensed with effort. Nothing. "Again." He tried, failed. "Again." "I can't eat." "You can. Stop thinking about it. Just do it." Gideon's face twisted with concentration. His hands gripped the wheelchair arms. Every muscle in his upper body strained. His foot pressed against her hand. Not much. Maybe an inch of movement, but unmistakable. Ren felt it and had to work to keep her voice steady. "Good. Again." He did it again, stronger this time. Again. By the end of the session, he could push with both feet, could hold the pressure for several seconds, could repeat it without the same agonizing effort. "This is really happening," Gideon said, staring at his legs like they belonged to someone else. "I'm actually getting better." "You're remembering," Ren corrected. "Your body never forgot. You just convinced yourself it had." "When can I try standing?" "Not yet." "When?" "When you're ready. If you try too soon, you'll fall. You'll hurt yourself, and worse, you'll lose faith that it's possible." "I won't lose faith. Everyone does when they fail. So we wait until failure isn't an option." Gideon looked like he wanted to argue, but he'd learned by now that when Ren said something about the healing process, she meant it. "How long?" he asked instead.
I don't know. Maybe another week? Maybe 2. Your body will tell us. And then?
Then you stand. And after that, Ren met his eyes. After that, you walk. Walks. But secrets on a ranch are like cracks in a dam. Small at first, easy to ignore, until suddenly they're not. It started with Maria. "You've been going upstairs," she said one afternoon, voice carefully neutral. Ren kept her hands busy shelling peas. "Yes." "Fletcher told you not to." "He did." "Why are you doing it?" "Because Gideon needed help." Maria set down her knife. "Ren, listen to me. I've been on this ranch for 12 years. I watched that boy before the accident, bright, strong, full of life. And I watched him after. Watched the doctors shake their heads. Watched Fletcher build that room like a tomb. Watched Gideon give up. He hasn't given up. Maybe not now, but he did. And Fletcher made his peace with it. So did the rest of us." Maria's voice softened. "What you're doing, giving that boy hope when there might not be any real chance, that's cruel. There's a chance." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." "How?" Ren looked up from the peas. "Because I've seen it work before. Because I know what I'm doing. And because 2 weeks ago, Gideon couldn't feel his legs. Yesterday, he pushed against my hand hard enough that I had to brace myself. That's not hope. That's proof." Maria stared at her for a long moment. "Can he really?" "Yes." "Does Fletcher know?" "Not yet." "Ren, I know it's a risk. I know I'm breaking his rules. But if I'd asked permission, he would have said no. Everyone would have said no. And Gideon would still be sitting in that chair convinced he'd never move again." Maria picked up her knife, but her hands weren't quite steady. "If this doesn't work, it's already working. Fletcher won't just fire you. He'll make sure you never work in this valley again." "I know. And if it does work, and people find out someone with no medical training was treating his son, I know that too." Maria shook her head slowly. "You're either very brave or very stupid. Probably both." A ghost of a smile crossed Maria's face. "Just be careful. Fletcher's been through enough. So has that boy. That's why I'm doing this." The confrontation Ren had been dreading came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks into the treatments. She was upstairs with Gideon, working his legs through their exercises, when she heard the front door slam. Fletcher's voice, loud and angry, echoed up from downstairs. "Where is she?" Ren and Gideon froze. Maria's response was too quiet to make out. Footsteps on the stairs, heavy, fast. "Hide the—" Gideon started, but there was nowhere to hide anything. The tray sat in plain sight. The room smelled of lavender and rosemary. Ren stood there with her hands on his leg, caught absolutely red-handed. The door flew open. Fletcher filled the doorway, face dark with fury. He looked at Ren, at the tray, at his son. Put it all together in an instant. "Get away from him." Ren stepped back, hands raised. Fletcher crossed the room in 3 strides. "I gave you one rule, one, and you broke it." "I did." "Do you have any idea—" He stopped, breathing hard, visibly struggling for control. "Do you understand what you've done?" "Yes." "Then you know you're finished here. Pack your things. You're leaving. Now." "Dad," Gideon started. "Not now, Gideon." "Dad, listen." "I said not now." Fletcher's voice cracked like a whip. Then quieter to Ren. "I trusted you. I brought you into my home. I gave you work when you needed it. And you repaid that by going behind my back and—" He gestured at the tray, at his son. "And what? Playing doctor? Giving him false hope?" "It's not false," Ren said quietly. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do, because it's working." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "Get out." "Show him," Ren said to Gideon. "What?" "Show him what you can do now." Fletcher's expression shifted slightly, confusion mixing with the anger. "What's she talking about?" Gideon looked between them, then down at his legs. "I can— Dad, I can move them." "No, you can't." "I can. Watch." Gideon closed his eyes, concentrated. His right foot flexed, then his left. Both obvious, unmistakable. Fletcher went absolutely still.
I can feel them, Gideon continued, words tumbling out now. For the first time in 3 years, I can feel my legs. I can move my feet. I can bend my knees. Dad, she's been helping me remember how to— Stop. Fletcher's voice was rough. He stared at his son's feet like they were a hallucination. That's not— The doctor said— The doctor was wrong, Wren said. Fletcher turned on her. You have no medical training, no authority, no right to— I have the knowledge my father left me, and I used it, and it worked. Your father. Fletcher's eyes narrowed. Who was your father? Wren hesitated. This was the question she'd been avoiding, the one that connected her to a past she'd been trying to outrun. His name was Elias Voss. Fletcher's entire demeanor changed. Voss? The healer from Timber Creek? You knew him? I knew of him. He died 7 years ago. Fire, they said. Burned down his homestead with him in it. Fletcher studied her face. You're his daughter. Yes. The one who disappeared after. Yes. Why didn't you say something when you came here? Because people who knew my father's name usually had opinions about whether his methods were legitimate, and I needed this job. Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, some of the anger had drained from his voice. Your father treated my brother once. Infection in his leg. 3 doctors said amputate. Your father saved it. Wren blinked. I didn't know. Happened 15 years ago. My brother's still walking on both legs. Fletcher looked at his son. Is what she's doing real? Or is this— Are you just hoping? It's real, Dad. I swear I can show you. Not now. Fletcher rubbed his face with both hands. I need to think. Both of you just— I need to think. He turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Wren and Gideon sat in silence. Well, Gideon said eventually, that could have gone worse. Could have gone better too. You think he'll still fire you? Probably. Then why do you look relieved? Wren realized she was smiling slightly. Because now it's not a secret anymore. Whatever happens next, at least it's out in the open. And so I say, Fletcher didn't fire her. He didn't apologize either. What he did do was stranger. He gave her permission. That evening, he found Wren in the kitchen, stood there awkwardly while she cleaned the supper dishes, clearly uncomfortable with whatever he'd come to say. Finally, how long will it take? Wren turned to face him. For what? For him to walk. I don't know, maybe a few more weeks, maybe longer. Every person is different. But you think he can? I know he can. The question is whether he'll let himself believe it's possible. Fletcher nodded slowly. His mother died when he was 12. The accident happened a year later. Between those two things, he trailed off. He stopped believing in much of anything. That's changing. Because of you. Because of him. I'm just showing him what he can do. He's the one doing it. Fletcher was quiet for a moment. I have conditions. All right. You keep doing what you're doing, but if at any point you think it's not working, if you think you're giving him false hope, you tell me. Immediately. I won't have him crushed again. Understood. And when he's ready to try standing, I want to be there. Of course. And Wren, Fletcher met her eyes. If you're wrong about this, if it doesn't work out, I won't blame you. You're trying to help. I understand that. But if he gets hurt, if this makes things worse, it won't. You can't know that. No, Wren admitted. I can't. But I believe it. And I think that has to be enough. Fletcher studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right. We try it your way. He left before Wren could respond. She stood there in the empty kitchen, hands still wet from dishwater, and realized she'd just committed herself to something she couldn't take back. Either Gideon would walk, or he wouldn't. Either she'd give him his life back, or she'd be the person who raised his hopes and shattered them. No middle ground. No safe outcome. Just the work, and the waiting, and the impossible belief that broken things could be made whole again if you refused to accept they were truly broken. Wren dried her hands and went to bed. Tomorrow, they'd keep trying. And the day after that. And the day after that. Until Gideon walked, or until they ran out of days to try. The morning after Fletcher gave his permission,
Wren woke before dawn with a knot in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. Permission was one thing, success was another. And now that the secret was out, failure would be visible to everyone. She dressed in the dark, lit the kitchen stove, and started the coffee. Her hands moved through the familiar routine while her mind ran through everything that could go wrong. Gideon could plateau. The progress could reverse. He could push too hard and injure himself worse than before. Or, and this was what kept her awake most nights, she could be wrong about all of it. The coffee was brewing when Fletcher came downstairs. He looked like he hadn't slept much either. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He poured himself a cup, drank it standing at the window. "I've been thinking." Wren waited. The doctor who saw Gideon after the accident, Dr. Mercer from town, he's going to hear about this eventually. Once Gideon starts showing real improvement, people will talk, and Mercer's not going to like hearing his diagnosis was wrong. "I know. He'll make trouble." "Probably." Fletcher turned to face her. "I'm telling you this so you're prepared. Mercer's got influence. He could bring the law into it, claim you're practicing medicine without a license. Could make your life very difficult. Then we'll deal with it when it happens." "Just like that?" "What else can we do? Stop? Tell Gideon sorry. We were making progress, but it might upset the doctor?" Wren shook her head. "No, we keep going, and when trouble comes, we face it." Fletcher almost smiled. "You're stubborn." "So I've been told." "Good. You'll need to be." He set down his cup. "I'm riding out to the north pasture today. Won't be back until evening. Will you?" "I'll work with him this morning, same as always." Fletcher nodded and left without another word. Maria came in a few minutes later, took one look at Wren's face, and said, "Stop worrying." "I'm not worried." "You're a terrible liar." Maria started pulling out flour and lard for biscuits. "That boy's been dead inside for 3 years. Now he's got something to fight for. Whatever happens, you gave him that." "What if it's not enough?" "Then it's not enough. But at least he'll know someone tried." Wren wanted to argue, but the ranch hands started filing in for breakfast, and the conversation got lost in the noise of 15 hungry men who didn't care about anything except hot food and strong coffee. After breakfast, Wren heated the water and prepared the oils. The routine had become so familiar she could do it without thinking, which was good because her mind was elsewhere. She climbed the stairs and knocked. "Come in," Gideon called. He was already in position by the window, wheelchair angled to catch the morning light. He looked different than he had a month ago, less hollow, more present, like someone who'd remembered what it felt like to want something. "Ready?" Wren asked. "Always." She set down the tray and got to work. The first 15 minutes were the same as always, warming the muscles, working through the established range of motion, checking for responses. Gideon's progress had been steady but incremental. Small gains, carefully measured. Today felt different. "Try lifting your knee," Wren said. Gideon concentrated, face tight with effort. His left knee rose 2 inches off the chair, held for 3 seconds, lowered. Again. He did it again, easier this time. Now the right. Same result. Maybe even a little higher. Wren sat back. "How does it feel?" "Strong. Stronger than yesterday." Gideon looked at his legs like he was seeing them for the first time. "I think I'm ready." "For what?" "To try standing." Wren had known this was coming, had been preparing for it, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that planning couldn't. "Not yet," she said. "Why not? You saw what I just did." "I did. And it's good progress. But standing requires more than lifting your knees. You need core strength, balance, the ability to catch yourself if you start to fall. So let's work on that." "We have been. But there's a difference between being able to move your legs and being able to support your full weight on them. If you try too soon and collapse, you could hurt yourself. Worse, you'll lose confidence." Gideon's jaw set in a way that reminded Wren of his father. "I'm not going to lose confidence. Everyone does when they fail at something they've built up in their mind. Then don't let me fail." He leaned forward. "You said my body would tell us when I'm ready. Well, my body's telling me right now. I can feel it. I'm strong enough." Feeling strong and being strong enough are different things. "How much longer?" "I don't know. Another week, maybe." "A week?" Gideon's voice rose. "I've been stuck in this chair for 3 years." 3 years.
And now you want me to wait another week when I'm this close? Yes. That's not fair. I'm not trying to be fair. I'm trying to keep you safe. I don't want safe. The words burst out of him. I want to stand up. I want to walk across this room. I want to go downstairs like a normal person instead of being carried like a child. I want... He stopped, breathing hard. I want my life back. Ren understood. She did. But understanding didn't change the reality of what his body could and couldn't do yet. I know what you want, she said quietly, but wanting it doesn't make you ready. Your legs are getting stronger, but your muscles have atrophied. Your balance is untested. Your body's been sitting for 3 years. You can't just stand up and expect everything to work perfectly. So what do I do? You keep working. You be patient. And when you're actually ready, not just when you think you are, we'll try. Gideon slumped back in his chair, frustration written all over his face. This is killing me. I know. Do you? Do you really?
Green met his eyes. My father was burned alive in our house while I hid in the root cellar. I spent 6 months after that living in the woods because I was afraid the people who killed him would come for me too. So yes, I know what it's like to want something so badly you can taste it and not be able to have it. I know what waiting feels like when every day is too long. But I also know that rushing gets you killed, so you're going to wait. And you're going to do it without complaining. The room went silent. Gideon stared at her. I didn't know. About your father. No reason you would. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just trust me when I tell you that patience is the difference between success and disaster. Gideon nodded slowly. All right. We wait. But not a week. Give me 3 days. 3 days of working as hard as I can and then we try. Deal? Ren considered. 3 days was still rushing it, but she could see the determination in his face, the need to have something to work toward that wasn't indefinitely far away. 3 days, she agreed. But if I don't think you're ready when we get there, we wait longer. No arguments. No arguments. And we don't tell your father until you can actually do it. I don't want to get his hopes up for nothing. Agreed. They shook on it. Over the next 3 days, Ren pushed Gideon harder than she'd pushed him before. Longer sessions, more repetitions, exercises that left him sweating and shaking with exhaustion. He never complained. Every morning, she'd come upstairs to find him already attempting the exercises on his own, lifting his knees, flexing his feet, working muscles that had been dormant for years. His upper body was strong from 3 years of supporting himself, but his core and legs were playing catch-up. Again, Ren would say, and Gideon would grit his teeth and do it again. By the second day, he could hold both knees up simultaneously for 10 seconds, could flex his feet hard enough to push against resistance, could maintain tension in his leg muscles long enough that Ren started to believe this might actually work. By the 3rd day, she was sure of it. Tomorrow, she told him that evening. Gideon looked up sharply. Tomorrow? Tomorrow morning, early, before anyone else is up. We try. You think I'm ready? I think if we wait any longer, you're going to try it yourself and break something important. So yes, we try tomorrow. Gideon's grin was the first real one she'd seen from him. I won't let you down. Don't worry about letting me down. Worry about not falling on your face. That too. Ren left him that night feeling something she hadn't felt in years, hope mixed with terror in equal measure. Either this would work or it wouldn't, and by this time tomorrow, everyone would know which. She barely slept. The next morning, Ren was up an hour before dawn. She made coffee, drank it too fast, burned her tongue, paced the kitchen until she couldn't stand waiting anymore. Then she climbed the stairs. Gideon was already awake, sitting in his wheelchair by the window. The curtains were open. The first pale light of dawn was bleeding into the sky. Couldn't sleep either? Ren asked. Not even a little. Nervous? Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you careful. Ren crossed to his chair. Ready? As I'll ever be. Ren positioned herself beside him, bracing stance, ready to catch him if he fell. All right. First, we need to get you to the edge of the chair. Slide forward. Gideon used his arms to shift his weight, moving to the front of the seat. His legs hung down, feet flat on the floor. Now lean forward. Put your weight on your feet, but keep your hands on the armrests. Don't try to stand yet. Just feel the pressure on your legs. Gideon leaned. His face went tight with concentration. I can feel it. The weight. Good. Can your legs support it? I think so. Thinking's not good enough. Can they or can't they? They can. All right, now comes the hard part. Ren moved to stand directly in front of him, close enough that if he started to fall, she could catch him. On 3, you're going to push up with your arms and your legs at the same time. Don't try to straighten all the way. Just get your weight off the chair. I'll be right here. Ready? Gideon's hands tightened on the armrests. Ready. 1, 2, 3. Gideon pushed. For a moment, nothing happened. His arms strained, his legs trembled, his whole body shook with effort. And then he rose. 6 inches off the chair, maybe 8, not standing, not really, but unmistakably, undeniably up. Hold it, Ren said. Hold it. Feel your legs. Are they supporting you? Yes. Gideon's voice was strained but clear. Yes, I can feel them. They're holding. 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Down. He lowered himself back into the chair, breathing hard. His entire body was shaking. You did it, Ren said. That wasn't standing. That was the start of standing. Tomorrow, we'll do it again. Hold it longer. In a few days, you'll straighten your legs. In a week. A week's too long. Gideon, no, listen, I did it once. I can do it again. Right now. Before Ren could stop him, he gripped the armrests and pushed. This time he rose higher. This time his legs straightened. Not all the way, but enough. And for 3 perfect seconds, Gideon Hadley stood. Then his left leg buckled. Ren caught him before he hit the floor, taking his weight against her shoulder. They went down together in a controlled fall, ending in a heap on the rug. You all right? Ren demanded. Gideon was laughing, actually laughing. I stood up. Did you see that? I stood up. You also fell. I don't care. I stood up. He looked at his legs like they'd performed a miracle. 3 years, and I finally... The door burst open. Fletcher stood there, still in his nightshirt, hair disheveled. I heard a crash. What? He stopped, taking in the scene. Ren and Gideon on the floor, the wheelchair pushed to the side, the expression on his son's face. Dad, Gideon said. I stood up. Fletcher's face went through about 6 different emotions in 2 seconds. You what? I stood up, right here, right now. Ren was helping me, and Dad, I stood up. Fletcher looked at Ren. Is that true? Yes. Show me. He needs to rest first. Show me now. Ren helped Gideon back into the wheelchair, positioned herself, went through the same instructions. This time, with his father watching, Gideon pushed up and held it for 5 full seconds, legs straight, weight on his feet, standing. When he lowered himself back down, Fletcher made a sound like he'd been punched. How long have you been able to do that? This is the first time, Gideon said. We've been building up to it. And you didn't think to tell me? We wanted to be sure it would work. Fletcher turned to Ren. This is what you've been doing? For weeks? Yes. And you knew this was possible the whole time? I knew it was possible. I didn't know if he'd be able to do it, but I thought it was worth trying. Fletcher pressed both hands to his face. When he lowered them, his eyes were wet. My son just stood up. Yes. The doctors said he never would. The doctors were wrong. Fletcher crossed to Gideon's chair, dropped to one knee beside it, put both hands on his son's face, and just looked at him. You stood up. I did. You're going to walk again. I am. Father and son stared at each other, and Ren saw years of grief and resignation and quiet despair crack open all at once. Fletcher pulled Gideon into a hug, awkward, fierce, desperate. Ren slipped out of the room and closed the door behind her. She made it halfway down the stairs before her legs gave out. She sat down hard on the steps, shaking. It had worked. Against all the doubt and fear and the very real possibility of failure, it had worked. Gideon had stood. And in a few weeks, he'd walk. And after that, Ren heard footsteps behind her. Fletcher appeared at the top of the stairs. You all right? He asked. Fine. Just needed a minute. He came down and sat beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then, "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He's not walking." "He will be." "Maybe." "Definitely." Fletcher rubbed his face. "I need to ask you something."
All right. Why'd you do this? Really? You could have just cooked, taken your pay, stayed invisible. Instead, you risked everything to help a kid you didn't know. Why? Ren was quiet for a moment. When I was 14, my father treated a girl who'd been thrown from a wagon. Everyone said she'd never walk again. My father worked with her for months. Everyone told him to give up. He didn't, and 6 months later she walked. And that's why you helped Gideon? No. I helped Gideon because 3 years ago, I watched my father burn to death and didn't do anything to stop it. I hid. I survived. And I've been trying to figure out how to live with that ever since. Ren looked at Fletcher. Your son needed help. I could give it, so I did. That's all. Fletcher nodded slowly. The people who killed your father, they ever face justice? No. You know who they were? Yes. But you can't prove it. Not without getting killed myself.
Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. The land they took from your father, where was it?
Timber Creek Territory, eastern section. Something shifted in Fletcher's expression. Eastern section. Yes. Why? Because I own land in Timber Creek, eastern pasture. Bought it 7 years ago from a man named Garrett, who said he'd acquired it in a legal sale. Ren's blood went cold. Thomas Garrett. You know him. He's the one who killed my father. Fletcher swore quietly. The deed's in my office. I'll look at it today. If it shows, it won't matter. Garrett's good at covering his tracks. And even if you found something wrong with the title, it's been 7 years. The law won't care. Maybe not, but I'll care. Fletcher stood. If that land was your father's, it should be yours. I'll look into it. You don't have to. Yes, I do. You gave me my son back. The least I can do is look into whether I'm squatting on your inheritance. He started down the stairs, then paused. Ren? Yeah? Whatever happens with the land, you've got a place here as long as you want it, and not as a cook, as family. He left before she could respond. Ren sat on the stairs for a long time after that, trying to process what had just happened.
In the span of one morning, Gideon had stood. Fletcher had offered her a home, and the land her father had died for, the land she'd thought was lost forever, might not be as lost as she'd believed. It felt like too much, like the universe was trying to make up for 7 years of running and hiding and surviving by giving her everything all at once. Ren didn't trust it. Good things didn't last. Not in her experience. But for right now, in this moment, she let herself feel something close to hope. It didn't last long. 2 days later, trouble arrived in the form of Dr. Silas Mercer. Ren was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard a horse approach. She glanced out the window and saw a well-dressed man on a bay mare, medical bag strapped to his saddle. Maria saw him too. That's Mercer. How do you know? Because he's the only doctor for 50 miles who rides like someone shoved a poker up his... Maria caught herself. Just trust me. That's him. Fletcher met Mercer at the door. Their voices carried through the open window. Mr. Hadley, I heard some concerning rumors in town. What kind of rumors? That you've hired someone to treat your son, someone with no medical credentials. Where'd you hear that? Does it matter? Is it true? Fletcher's voice went flat. That's none of your business. I'm afraid it is. I'm the physician who treated Gideon after his accident. I have a professional obligation to ensure he's receiving proper care. He's receiving excellent care. From whom? A trained doctor? Or some traveling charlatan with folk remedies and false promises? From someone who's helping him when you said there was no help to give. Silence. Then Mercer's voice, colder. I'd like to examine the boy. No. Mr. Hadley, I can have the sheriff compel you. Try it. See what happens. I'm trying to help your son. You had your chance to help 3 years ago. You gave up on him. Someone else didn't. Now get off my property. If I find out that someone is practicing medicine without a license, I will report them to the territorial authorities. There are laws, and if I find out you're harassing people on my land, there are consequences. Now, leave. Ren heard footsteps, then the sound of Mercer riding away.
Fletcher came into the kitchen a moment later, face dark with anger. That's going to be a problem, he said. I know. He'll make trouble, file complaints, maybe get the law involved. Let him. Ren, what's he going to do? Arrest me for helping someone recover? Charge me with making a boy stand when he couldn't before? Ren shook her head. Let him try. In the meantime, we keep working. He could have you run out of the territory. Then I'll go, but not until Gideon can walk. Fletcher studied her. You're not going to back down, are you? No. Good. Neither am I. Over the next week, Gideon's progress accelerated. He could stand for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, could shift his weight from foot to foot, could maintain his balance with only light support. And then 8 days after that first attempt, he took a step. Just one. Clumsy and uncertain and requiring Ren's arm for balance, but unmistakably a step. Again, Ren said. He did it again. Then again. By the end of the session, he'd walked 5 steps across the room. The next day, 10 steps. The day after that, he made it from his chair to the door and back. Word spread through the ranch like wildfire. The hands who'd watched Gideon carried downstairs for 3 years suddenly saw him walking, hesitant and shaky, but walking, across the yard. Maria cried. Fletcher watched like a man witnessing a resurrection, and Ren kept working because walking 5 steps wasn't the same as walking confidently, and she wouldn't be satisfied until Gideon could move without thinking about it. But success brought attention. More people from town started showing up, curious about the miracle at Hadley Ranch. Some came to congratulate Fletcher, others came to stare. A few came to accuse Ren of witchcraft or trickery or fraud. Fletcher turned them all away. And then, 2 weeks after Mercer's first visit, the sheriff arrived. Ren was working with Gideon when she heard voices downstairs. Fletcher's, another man's, both tense. We should stop, she said. Why? Because I think the law just showed up. Gideon's expression hardened. I don't care, let them watch. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. Fletcher appeared in the doorway, followed by a man in his 50s with a badge pinned to his vest. Sheriff wants to talk to you, Fletcher said to Ren. The sheriff stepped into the room, looked at Gideon standing beside his wheelchair, and stopped. That the boy who was paralyzed? Yes, Fletcher said, and he's standing. He's walking. Show him, Gideon. Gideon walked across the room 10 steps, smooth and deliberate, turned, walked back. The sheriff's expression didn't change. How long's he been able to do that? 2 weeks, Fletcher said. And before that? Before that, he couldn't move his legs at all, just like the doctor said. The sheriff turned to Ren. You the one treating him? Yes. You a doctor? No. Licensed medical practitioner of any kind? No. Then you're practicing medicine without credentials, which is illegal in this territory. Fletcher stepped between them. She's not practicing medicine. She's helping my son recover. That's semantics, Mr. Hadley. It's the truth. Dr. Mercer filed a formal complaint, says this woman's a fraud, says she's endangering your son with untested methods. Mercer's wrong. Maybe. But the law says my son couldn't walk and now he can. You just saw it with your own eyes. Fletcher's voice was hard. So you tell me, Sheriff, what law did she break? The one that says people can't get better? The one that says doctors are never wrong? The sheriff looked uncomfortable. I'm not here to argue medicine. I'm here because a complaint was filed. And you've investigated it. You've seen Gideon. You've seen he's fine, better than fine. So what else do you need? I need to know this woman's not running she's not running anything. She's a guest in my house. And unless you've got evidence of an actual crime, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave. The sheriff held Fletcher's stare for a long moment. Then he looked at Gideon again. You all right, son? She treating you well? She saved my life, Gideon said quietly. That's not what I asked. Yes, sir. I'm fine. Better than I've been in 3 years. The sheriff nodded slowly. All right. I'll put in my report that the boy appears healthy and the treatment seems to be working. But Miss... He looked at Ren. You should know Mercer's not going to let this go. He's talking about bringing in physicians from the capital to examine the boy. Talking about filing a lawsuit. You've made an enemy.
I can live with that, Wren said. Hope you're right. The sheriff tipped his hat to Fletcher. I'll show myself out. After he left, Fletcher turned to Wren. This is getting worse. I know. Mercer's not going to stop until he's discredited you or run you out. So let him try. Wren, I'm not afraid of him, Fletcher, and I'm not leaving until Gideon can walk without help. She looked at Gideon. How much longer do you think? Honestly? Gideon considered. A week? Maybe less. Then we've got a week to finish what we started. Wren met Fletcher's eyes. After that, Mercer can do whatever he wants, but he's not stopping this. Not now. Fletcher looked between them, then sighed. All right, 1 week. But when Mercer comes back, and he will come back, we're settling this once and for all. How? I don't know yet. But I'll figure something out. That week felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for someone to push. Wren kept working with Gideon, pushing him harder each day, racing against whatever trouble Mercer was brewing in town. The sessions grew longer, more intense. Gideon walked laps around his room, then down the hallway, then carefully down the stairs with Wren spotting him from behind. Each step was steadier than the last. Each day, he needed less help. On the 5th day, he walked from the house to the barn and back without assistance. Fletcher watched from the porch, hands gripping the railing so hard his knuckles went white. He's really doing it, Maria whispered from beside Wren. They stood by the kitchen door, both pretending to be busy with other things while watching every movement Gideon made. He is, Wren said. So why do you look like you're about to be sick? Because this is when it all falls apart. When things are going well, that's when the universe reminds you nothing good lasts. Maria snorted. You're too young to be that cynical. I'm old enough to know better than to trust good fortune. Maybe you should try it sometime, trusting things. Maria headed back inside. Might do you good. But Wren couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. She'd lived long enough to know that when powerful men felt threatened, they didn't back down, they escalated. And Mercer had the kind of power that came with credentials and respectability, things Wren had never possessed and never would. She was right to worry. 2 days later, Mercer returned, but this time he didn't come alone. Wren was in the yard, hanging laundry, when she heard the horses. 5 of them, riding in formation like they were arriving for a siege. Mercer in the lead, the sheriff beside him, and 3 men Wren didn't recognize. Well-dressed, carrying themselves with the kind of authority that came from education and money. Fletcher came out of the barn, saw the party, and his expression went cold. Mercer, back so soon? Mr. Hadley. Mercer dismounted, gesturing to the men with him. I've brought colleagues from the Territorial Medical Board. They're here to examine your son and assess the treatment he's been receiving. My son doesn't need examining. I'm afraid that's not your decision to make. We have legal authority to investigate claims of medical malpractice and unlicensed practice. Your cooperation is required. And if I refuse? One of the other doctors stepped forward, older, gray-haired, with the kind of face that looked like it had never smiled in its life. Then we'll have the sheriff compel you. We can do this easily, or we can do it the hard way, Mr. Hadley. Your choice. Fletcher's jaw tightened. For a moment, Wren thought he might actually throw them off the property physically. Then Gideon appeared in the doorway of the house. It's all right, Dad, he said. Let them examine me. Gideon, I want them to. I want them to see. Gideon walked down the porch steps, carefully, but without help, and crossed the yard to where the doctors stood. I'm Gideon Hadley. 3 years ago, Dr. Mercer told my father I'd never walk again. As you can see, he was wrong. The gray-haired doctor's expression didn't change. We'll see about that. Inside, please. They spent an hour in Gideon's room. Wren wasn't allowed up there. Fletcher, either. They waited downstairs while the doctors conducted their examination, the silence broken only by the occasional murmur of voices from above. Maria brought coffee. Nobody drank. The ranch hands found excuses to work near the house, curious and worried in equal measure. The whole ranch seemed to be holding its breath. Finally, footsteps on the stairs. The doctors emerged, Mercer in the lead wearing an expression of grim satisfaction. Well? Fletcher demanded. The gray-haired doctor spoke first. The boy shows remarkable improvement, I'll grant you that. But improvement doesn't equal cure. We found significant residual weakness in his lower extremities, unstable gait patterns, and reduced reflexes.
He's walking, yes, but he's far from fully recovered. He couldn't walk at all 6 weeks ago. Which brings us to the methods used to achieve this improvement. The doctor turned to look at Ren. You're the one who's been treating him? Yes. What are your qualifications? I don't have any, not the kind you'd recognize. Then you admit you have no medical training? I admit I never went to medical school. I learned from my father, who learned from people your schools don't acknowledge exist. Folk medicine, Mercer said with barely disguised contempt. Unproven remedies. Dangerous experimentation on a vulnerable patient. Dangerous? Gideon's voice cut through from where he stood on the stairs. She gave me my life back. You don't know that. The improvement could be natural recovery. After 3 years of nothing? Gideon came down the rest of the stairs. You told my father I'd never walk. You said the damage was permanent. You gave up on me. She didn't. Because she doesn't understand the complexity of spinal injuries, the gray-haired doctor said. She got lucky, boy. But luck isn't medicine. And what she's done, practicing without credentials, experimenting with unproven methods, it's illegal. Fletcher stepped forward. So what are you proposing? Mercer spoke up. We're recommending that this woman cease all treatment immediately. That Gideon be placed under proper medical supervision. Absolutely not. And that she face charges for unlicensed practice of medicine. The territorial authorities will determine appropriate penalties. Like hell they will. Mr. Hadley, this isn't a negotiation. The law is clear. The law doesn't know anything about what happened here. You want to charge her with helping my son, with doing what you said was impossible? Go ahead and try. I'll fight you every step of the way. You'll lose, Mercer said flatly. We have the medical board behind us. We have documentation of her lack of credentials. You have nothing. The new voice came from the direction of the barn. An older man emerged from the shadows there. One of the ranch hands, though Ren had never paid much attention to him before. He walked with a slight limp, favored his left leg. You've got opinions and hurt pride, but you don't have proof of wrongdoing. Mercer turned. Who the hell are you? Name's Jacob Warren. Worked this ranch for 8 years. He crossed a stand beside Fletcher. 15 years ago, I broke my leg. Compound fracture. 3 different doctors said it had to come off or I'd die from infection. Elias Voss said otherwise. Spent 2 months treating me with methods none of those doctors understood. Saved my leg. Ren's breath caught. She remembered her father mentioning a Jacob once, a man with a leg injury, one of his success stories. That's irrelevant, Mercer started. Is it? Because I'm standing here on 2 legs because a man without medical credentials knew more than the doctors who wanted to saw mine off. And his daughter, Jacob gestured at Ren, she's got the same knowledge, the same skills. She helped that boy when you'd already written him off as hopeless. One anecdotal success doesn't Then how about this? Another voice. Maria stepped out from the kitchen. My sister in Denver had consumption. Doctors said she had 6 months. Elias Voss treated her with herbs and breathing exercises. That was 12 years ago. She's still alive. Folk remedies and coincidence. I was there too. A woman Ren didn't recognize stepped forward from the group of onlookers that had gathered. 7 years ago, my son fell from a hayloft, cracked his skull. Dr. Mercer himself said the boy would either die or wake up simple-minded. Elias Voss sat with him for 3 days, used pressure points and God knows what else. My son woke up whole. He's working in Denver now, married with a daughter. More voices. More stories. People stepping forward one by one, each with a tale of how Elias Voss had healed them, or someone they loved when conventional medicine had failed. Ren stood frozen, watching strangers defend her father's legacy, defend her against doctors who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Mercer's face had gone red. This is absurd. These are unverified claims. Unverified? Fletcher's voice was dangerously quiet. These are people standing in front of you telling you what happened to them. You calling them all liars? I'm saying memory is unreliable and folk medicine is dangerous. More dangerous than telling a boy he'll never walk again? More dangerous than taking away his hope? Hope without scientific basis is cruelty. Is it? Gideon walked across the yard, steady and sure, stopped directly in front of Mercer. 3 years. I believed what you told me. 3 years I thought my life was over. Then Ren showed me it wasn't. And you're calling that cruelty? I'm calling it irresponsible. Prove it. The voice came from Fletcher. You want to charge her with something. Prove she did harm. Prove Gideon's worse off now than when she started treating him. Go ahead. I'm waiting. The gray-haired doctor cleared his throat. The issue isn't whether improvement occurred. It's whether proper medical protocols were followed. Your protocols said my son would never walk. Her methods got him walking in 6 weeks. You tell me which protocol's worth following. Silence fell over the yard. The doctors looked at each other, clearly not expecting this level of organized resistance. Mercer opened his mouth, closed it again. Even the sheriff looked uncomfortable. Finally, the gray-haired doctor spoke. This matter will need to be reviewed by the territorial board. In the meantime, nothing changes, Fletcher said. Wren stays. Gideon continues his recovery, and you can take your review and your medical board and... Dad. Gideon's voice was quiet. Let me. Fletcher looked at his son. Something passed between them, an understanding, maybe. Fletcher nodded. Gideon turned to face the doctors. You want proof that what Wren did works? I'll give you proof. He walked to the middle of the yard, put 20 feet between himself and the watching crowd. 6 weeks ago, I couldn't feel my legs. 4 weeks ago, I couldn't lift my knees. 2 weeks ago, I took my first step. We've seen you walk, Mercer started. I'm not done. Gideon's voice was steady. You said I'd never walk again. You were certain. You staked your professional reputation on it. So I want you to watch this, and I want you to remember that you were wrong. He began to walk, not the careful, measured steps Wren had been working with him on. Faster, more confident. He crossed the yard, turned, came back. Then he did something neither Wren nor Fletcher had seen him do before. He started to run. It wasn't a sprint, more of a jog, really. Uneven and awkward. His gait not quite natural yet, but unmistakably, undeniably running. Wren's heart stopped. He wasn't ready for this. His muscles weren't strong enough. He was going to fall, going to hurt himself. But Gideon kept going. Across the yard, around the well, back toward the house. His breathing was labored, his form terrible, but he stayed upright. He ran straight up to Mercer and stopped, breathing hard but grinning. Still thinks she doesn't know what she's doing? Mercer's face had gone pale. The other doctors looked stunned. Even the sheriff was staring. That's impossible, the gray-haired doctor said faintly. That's what you said the first time. Gideon turned to his father. I'm going to be sore tomorrow, aren't I? Probably. Worth it. Fletcher pulled his son into a rough hug. When he let go, his eyes were wet. The doctors stood there, frozen in the face of evidence they couldn't deny and didn't want to accept. Finally, Mercer found his voice. This doesn't change anything. The law still says... The law can say whatever it wants, Fletcher's voice carried across the yard. But every person here just watched a miracle happen. They watched my son run when you said he'd never even stand. So you go ahead and file your complaints and bring your charges. We'll fight them, and we'll win, because the truth's on our side. Mr. Hadley, get off my property, all of you, now. The sheriff stepped forward. Fletcher, maybe we should... Should what? Stand here and let them threaten the woman who saved my son? Not happening. They want to pursue this legally. They can do it through proper channels. But they're not doing it here. Not today. The sheriff looked at Mercer, at the other doctors, then back at Fletcher. I'll note in my report that the boy appears healthy and improved. Beyond that, this is out of my jurisdiction. He tipped his hat. Gentlemen, I think we're done here. Mercer looked like he wanted to argue. But the crowd of ranch workers and townspeople had grown larger, and they weren't looking friendly. He climbed back on his horse. This isn't over, he said. No, Fletcher agreed. It's not. But the next time you come here, you'd better have a damn good reason. They rode out in silence, Mercer rigid with anger, the other doctors looking shaken. The crowd watched them go, then erupted in conversation. Wren found herself surrounded by people, strangers, most of them, all wanting to shake her hand or tell her stories about her father. Jacob Warren gripped her shoulder. Your father saved my life, he said quietly. Least I could do was speak up for his daughter. I didn't know you were here. All this time, figured you had your reasons for keeping quiet about who you were. But when those doctors started making accusations, figured the truth needed to come out. He smiled slightly. Your father would be proud of what you did for that boy. Wren's throat went tight.
She managed to nod, couldn't manage words. Maria appeared at her elbow. Come on, let's get you inside before this turns into a revival meeting. Inside the kitchen, away from the crowd, Wren finally let herself collapse into a chair. Her hands were shaking. You all right? Maria asked. I don't know. That was terrifying? Exhilarating? Both? Both. Wren laughed weakly. Did you see Gideon run? I didn't teach him that. He's 17 and hasn't been able to move for 3 years. Of course he ran. Maria put a cup of coffee in front of her. Drink. You look like you're about to pass out. Wren drank. The coffee was terrible and too hot and exactly what she needed. Fletcher came in a few minutes later, Gideon with him. The boy was limping now, clearly feeling the effects of his impromptu sprint. That was stupid, Fletcher said to his son. I know. You could have hurt yourself. I know. Don't do it again. I probably will. Fletcher shook his head, but he was almost smiling. He turned to Wren. Thank you for everything, for not giving up on him. He did the hard part. We both know that's not true. Fletcher pulled out a chair, sat heavily. Mercer's going to keep coming. He's not going to let this go. I know. And the medical board might actually bring charges. Let them. Wren, Fletcher, I'm not running, not this time. She met his eyes. I spent 7 years hiding from my past, moving from place to place, never staying long enough to matter to anyone. I'm done with that. If Mercer wants a fight, he can have one.
You could lose. They could force you out of the territory. Maybe, but at least I'll lose standing my ground instead of running away. Gideon spoke up. They won't win. Too many people saw what happened. Too many witnesses. Witnesses don't always matter in court, Fletcher said, especially when you're up against men with credentials and connections.
Then we find better arguments. Gideon looked at his father. You always told me that truth matters, that doing the right thing is worth fighting for. Were you lying? No. Then we fight. Fletcher looked between them, his son, alive and determined where he'd been hollow and defeated for so long, and the woman who'd made that possible, and something in his expression shifted. All right, he said, we fight, but we do it smart. Wren, I need you to write down everything you did, every technique, every treatment. Make it detailed, scientific as you can. Why? Because if we're going to defend your methods, we need documentation. We need to show there was logic and knowledge behind what you did, not just luck and guesswork. I can do that. Good. And Gideon, Fletcher turned to his son, you're going to need to be examined by other doctors, ones who aren't on Mercer's side. Can you handle that? If it helps Wren, yes. It will. If we can get independent physicians to confirm your recovery, it undermines Mercer's claims. Fletcher stood. I'm riding into town tomorrow, going to talk to our lawyer, see what our options are. In the meantime, both of you, keep doing what you've been doing. Don't change anything. After Fletcher left, Gideon lingered. You're really not going to run? No? Why not? You could leave tonight, be 3 towns away before anyone noticed. Because I'm tired of running, and because you're not done recovering yet. I can walk. I can run. What's left? Strength, endurance, the ability to do all this without thinking about it. Wren met his eyes. You're not finished, Gideon, and neither am I. He nodded slowly. Thank you for staying. Thank me when this is over and we've won. We will win. I know we will. Wren wished she had his certainty, but she smiled anyway. Get some rest. You're going to be sore tomorrow. Already am. Gideon headed for the stairs, paused. My father was right, you know, about what he said earlier. Your family now, whatever happens, you've got a place here. He climbed the stairs before Wren could respond. Family. The word felt foreign, dangerous, like something she didn't deserve and couldn't keep. But for the first time in 7 years, she wanted to try. That night, Wren sat at the kitchen table with her father's journal open in front of her and started writing. She documented every treatment she'd given Gideon, every technique, every decision, and why she'd made it. She wrote about nerve pathways and muscle memory, about the difference between true paralysis and learned immobility. She wrote until her hand cramped and the candle burned low. Maria found her there near midnight. You should sleep. Almost done.
You've been saying that for 2 hours. Maria sat down across from her. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why'd you really stay? And don't give me that line about Gideon not being done. You could have left after he took his first step, and no one would have blamed you.
Wren was quiet for a moment. When my father died, I ran. I didn't fight. I didn't stay and defend his name or try to get justice. I just ran, and I've hated myself for it ever since. You were young, scared. I was a coward, and maybe I still am, but at least this time I'm a coward who's standing her ground. Wren closed the journal. Mercer wants to destroy my father's legacy, wants to prove everything he taught me was worthless. I can't let that happen. Not again.
Then you fight, Maria said simply. And you win. Because that boy upstairs deserves better than doctors who gave up on him. And you deserve better than spending the rest of your life running. What if we lose? Then we lose fighting. That's still better than not fighting at all. Wren smiled tiredly. When did you get so wise? I've been around long enough to know that the things worth having are the things worth fighting for. And you, girl, you're worth fighting for.
Maria squeezed her shoulder and headed to bed, leaving Wren alone with her thoughts and her father's journal and the growing certainty that she'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, legal battles, more accusations, attempts to run her out of the territory, she'd face it. Not alone this time. Not running. She'd stand her ground. And if Mercer wanted a war, she'd give him one. The next morning brought Fletcher back from town with news, some good, some concerning. He gathered Wren and Gideon in his office, spread papers across his desk. Talked to 3 lawyers, he said. 2 of them said we don't have a case. The third, Harrison, the one who handles my property disputes, he thinks we might have a chance. How? Wren asked.
Mercer's building his case on unlicensed practice of medicine, but Harrison says that's a gray area. You're not claiming to be a doctor. You didn't charge money. You helped someone in a private home with the consent of that person and his father. Technically, that might not qualify as practicing medicine under territorial law. Might not? It's never been tested, no precedent, which means if they charge you, it'll come down to how the judge interprets the statute.
So we could win or lose based on one man's opinion. That's how the law works sometimes. Fletcher pulled out another paper. But there's more. I did some digging on that land deed, the eastern pasture. Wren's attention sharpened. And? The deed shows Thomas Garrett sold it to me 7 years ago, but I found the original survey records. That land was recorded under your father's name, Elias Voss, and there's no record of a legal transfer from Voss to Garrett, because there wasn't one. Garrett took it after the fire, forged the paperwork. Can you prove that? No, my father kept his own records, but they burned with the house. Fletcher was quiet for a moment. What if they didn't? What do you mean? You said your father kept records. Where? In his study, but it all burned. Did it? You sure about that? Wren tried to remember. The fire had happened so fast, spreading from the barn to the house. She'd been in the root cellar when it started, had stayed there until the flames died down. By the time she emerged, everything was ash and charred timber. But her father's study had been on the north side of the house, away from where the fire started. I don't know, she admitted. I didn't look. I just assumed. Don't assume. Harrison says if we can prove Garrett forged the deed, we can invalidate the sale, which means the land would revert to your father's estate, which means it would be yours. That land's been sitting for 7 years. Doesn't matter. Property rights don't expire. If it's yours, it's yours. Fletcher met her eyes. I'm riding out to Timber Creek tomorrow, going to look at what's left of your father's place, see if anything survived. You want to come with me? Wren's first instinct was to refuse. She'd spent 7 years avoiding Timber Creek, avoiding the memories, avoiding the people who might recognize her, and ask questions she didn't want to answer. But Maria's words from last night echoed in her head. The things worth having are the things worth fighting for. Yes, she said. I'll come. Good. We leave at dawn. Fletcher gathered the papers. And Wren, if we find proof that land's yours, I'm signing it over. It never should have been mine in the first place. You don't have to. Yes, I do. It's the right thing to do. He looked at Gideon. Your mother always said that doing right matters more than doing easy. I'm trying to live up to that. Gideon nodded, and Wren saw the grief there, old but still present, the loss of a woman who'd shaped both of them, even in her absence. "Thank you," Wren said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. We haven't found anything. And even if we do, proving forgery 7 years after the fact won't be easy." "Nothing worth doing is easy." Fletcher smiled faintly. "No, it's not." They left before sunrise, 2 horses cutting through the pre-dawn cold. Wren hadn't been back to Timber Creek in 7 years, and every mile closer felt like riding toward a grave she'd spent half her life trying to forget. Fletcher didn't push conversation. He rode steady and quiet, letting her sit with whatever ghosts were stirring. The landscape shifted from open range to scrub pine as they climbed into hill country, and Wren recognized landmarks she'd tried to erase from memory. The split boulder where she and her father used to rest their horses. The creek bend where he'd taught her to identify healing plants by their roots. By mid-morning, they reached the old wagon road that led to what had been the Voss homestead. Wren pulled her horse to a stop. "You all right?" Fletcher asked. "No, but let's keep going anyway." The road was overgrown now, barely visible through 7 years of neglect. Grass had reclaimed the wheel ruts. Saplings grew where her father used to drive the wagon. Nature had worked hard to erase any evidence that people had lived here. They rounded the last bend, and Wren saw it, or what was left of it. The barn was completely gone, just a black scar on the ground and a few charred support beams jutting up like broken bones. The house was worse. The entire western half had collapsed into ash and rubble. The roof had caved in. The walls that remained stood like tombstones marking something dead. But the northern section, her father's study and the attached workroom, those walls still stood. Damaged, yes. Blackened by smoke and missing chunks of timber. But standing. Wren dismounted on legs that didn't feel entirely steady. "Want me to come with you?" Fletcher asked. "No, I need to do this alone." She approached the ruins slowly, picking her way through debris. The front door was gone. The porch had rotted away. She stepped through what had been the entrance and into a space that barely resembled a house anymore. The main room was destroyed, nothing but ash and collapsed beams. The kitchen, where her father had taught her to prepare medicines, was open to the sky. But the hallway to the study remained partially intact, though the floorboards groaned under her weight. Wren moved carefully, testing each step. The door to the study hung crooked on one hinge. She pushed it open. The room was a disaster. Water damage from 7 winters had warped everything. The desk had collapsed. Papers were scattered everywhere, most of them molded beyond recognition. The bookshelf had fallen, spilling volumes that were now pulp and decay. This was pointless. Nothing could have survived this. But Wren had come this far. She might as well look. She started with the desk debris, lifting pieces carefully. The drawers had mostly disintegrated, their contents ruined. She found the remains of her father's spectacles, bent and corroded. An inkwell, shattered. Scraps of paper that fell apart when she touched them. Then she remembered something. Her father had kept his most important documents in a metal box. "Waterproof," he'd said. "Fireproof too, to a degree." He'd stored it in the bottom desk drawer, wrapped in oilcloth. Wren dropped to her knees and started digging through the wreckage of the desk. Rotted wood came apart in her hands. Mice had nested in what remained of the drawer. But there, beneath layers of debris and rodent droppings, she felt something solid. Metal. Corroded and dented, but intact. She pulled out a rectangular box about the size of a large book. The lock was rusted shut. The oilcloth wrapping had mostly deteriorated, but it had done its job. The box itself was sealed tight. Wren's hand shook as she carried it outside into better light. Fletcher looked up from where he'd been examining the property boundaries. "Find something?" "Maybe. I need something to break this lock." Fletcher produced a knife from his belt. It took 3 tries and considerable force, but the lock finally snapped. Wren pried open the lid. Inside, protected from 7 years of weather and decay, were papers. Yellowed and slightly damp at the edges, but readable. Property deeds. Treatment records. And most importantly, a ledger documenting every patient her father had ever treated, every property transaction, every detail of his life's work. Wren's vision blurred. She blinked hard, forced herself to focus. "What is it?" Fletcher asked. "Everything. My father documented everything." She spread out the papers on a flat rock. "Look, here's the original deed for this property. Filed 15 years ago. Elias Voss, purchaser. And here, she shuffled through more papers. Here's the eastern pasture. He bought it 9 years ago from a widow named Patterson, 500 acres, paid in full. Fletcher examined the documents. This is good. This is exactly what we need.
There's more. Wren found another stack of papers bound together with string. Letters, correspondence with Thomas Garrett. She started reading, and her stomach turned. Garrett tried to buy the eastern pasture 3 times. My father refused, said the land was for me, my inheritance. Garrett kept pushing, kept offering more money. Then the letters stop, 6 months before the fire. That's motive. That's not proof. Nothing here says Garrett started the fire or forged the deed. No, but it establishes your father owned the land legally and refused to sell. If Garrett produced a deed of sale after your father died, we can argue it's fraudulent, especially since there's no bill of sale here, no record of payment. Wren kept sorting through papers. Treatment records, dozens of them, including Jacob Warren's case, the woman Maria had mentioned, others she recognized from the stories people had told. Her father had been meticulous, documenting symptoms, treatments, outcomes. Reading them felt like hearing his voice again, patient and precise. Then she found something else, a sealed envelope with her name on it. Her breath caught. "What is it?" Fletcher asked. "A letter. He wrote me a letter." "You going to open it?" Wren stared at the envelope. Her father's handwriting, still clear after 7 years. She'd thought she'd never see it again. "Not here," she said quietly. "Later. When I can. When I'm ready." She tucked the letter into her jacket and focused on the rest of the documents. There were more deeds, more correspondence, more evidence of the life her father had built here, a life that had been stolen from both of them. They spent another hour searching the ruins but found nothing else of value. Most of the physical evidence had been destroyed, but the documents in the metal box, those might be enough. On the ride back, Fletcher said, "I'll take these to Harrison tomorrow. Let him review them, see if we have a case. And if we do, then we go after Garrett. Legally. Force him to prove he bought that land legitimately. If he can't, and I don't think he can, the deed's void. The land reverts to your father's estate. Which means it's mine." "Yes." Wren rode in silence for a while. "I don't even know what I'd do with 500 acres. Whatever you want. Farm it, sell it, let it sit. Point is, it's yours by right, and Garrett took it through fraud and murder. We can't prove the murder part. Maybe not in court, but everyone in Timber Creek knows Garrett's reputation, knows how he operates. Getting the land back won't bring your father back, but it's something. It's justice, even if it's incomplete." Wren thought about that. Justice. The word felt strange. She'd spent so long just trying to survive that the idea of actually fighting back, of reclaiming what had been stolen, seemed almost impossible. But maybe that was the point. Maybe survival wasn't enough anymore. They reached the ranch by late afternoon. Gideon was in the yard, walking laps like Wren had taught him. His gait was stronger now, more natural. He waved when he saw them approach. "Find anything?" he called. "Everything," Wren said. Inside, they spread the documents across Fletcher's desk. Maria brought coffee and leaned over to look at the papers. "That's your father's handwriting," she said to Wren. "Yes." "I remember him. Used to come through town sometimes, selling remedies, always polite, always knew exactly what he was talking about." Maria touched one of the treatment records gently. "He helped my aunt once. Pneumonia. The doctor had given up, but your father sat with her for 3 days. Saved her life." "I didn't know that." "A lot of people your father helped. A lot of people who remember." Maria straightened. "When this goes to court, and it will go to court, those people will stand with you, just like they did when Mercer came. Will it be enough?" "It'll have to be." Fletcher gathered the papers carefully. "I'm riding to town at first light, meeting with Harrison, then filing a formal challenge to Garrett's deed. Once that's done, this becomes official. There will be a hearing, probably within a month. You'll need to testify." "I can do that." "It won't be easy. Garrett will have lawyers. He'll fight this." "Let him." Wren's voice was steadier than she felt. "I'm done running." That night, alone in her small room, Wren finally opened her father's letter. Her hand shook as she broke the seal. The paper inside was covered in his careful script. "My dearest Wren," it began, "if you're reading this, then I am gone, and you have survived whatever took me. I am both sorry and grateful. Sorry that you had to face loss. Grateful that you lived through it. You are stronger than you know, daughter. Stronger than I was at your age. You carry knowledge that the world needs, even if the world doesn't always recognize it. Don't let anyone convince you that what I taught you is worthless. Don't let doctors with degrees and certifications make you doubt what you know to be true. The healing arts are older than their schools, deeper than their books. You carry that legacy now. Use it. Help people. Don't hide what you are out of fear. I made that mistake too often, kept my head down when I should have stood tall. Be braver than I was. Be the healer I always knew you could become. The land is yours. The knowledge is yours. The future is yours. Don't waste it. With all my love, your father. Ren read it 3 times, vision blurring with tears she'd held back for 7 years. Her father had known something was coming, had prepared for the possibility that he wouldn't survive. And he'd left her not just property and documents, but permission. Permission to be who she was. Permission to stop hiding. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her father's journal, next to the treatment notes she'd been compiling. 2 generations of knowledge, passed down. 2 generations of healers who'd worked outside the system, helped people the system had abandoned. She wouldn't let that legacy die. The next 3 weeks moved like a slow avalanche, gathering weight and momentum, heading toward an impact that felt inevitable. Fletcher filed the challenge to Garrett's deed. Garrett responded with lawyers in outrage, claiming the sale had been legitimate, that he had documentation to prove it. The territorial court scheduled a hearing. Meanwhile, Mercer filed his complaint with the medical board. They sent investigators to interview Gideon, to review Wren's methods, to question Fletcher about allowing unlicensed treatment in his home. The investigators were thorough and skeptical. They examined Gideon for 2 hours, tested his strength and reflexes, reviewed the documentation Wren had prepared. They asked pointed questions about her training, her techniques, her understanding of anatomy and physiology. Wren answered honestly. She had no formal education. She'd learned from her father, who'd learned from practitioners whose methods predated modern medicine. She couldn't cite medical journals or university studies. She could only point to results. A boy who'd been told he'd never walk and was now running. The investigators left without committing to any conclusion. They'd file their report with the board. A decision would come within the month. Gideon continued improving. He could walk for hours now without tiring. His strength had returned. His coordination had improved to the point where only someone looking closely would notice any remaining weakness. "I think I'm done," he said one morning during their session. Wren looked up from where she was reviewing his gait. "Done with what?" "Done recovering. I feel normal. Like I did before the accident, maybe even stronger since I've been working so hard." He walked across the room, turned, came back. "What else is there to work on?" Wren considered. He was right. The physical recovery was essentially complete. Anything more would just be maintenance, staying strong rather than getting stronger. "You're right," she said. "We're done." "Really?" "Really, you've worked hard. You've earned this." Gideon broke into a grin. "So I can actually do things now? Ride horses? Help with ranch work? Live like a normal person?" "Yes, but carefully at first. Your body's been through a lot. Don't push too hard too fast." "I'll be careful." He paused. "What about you? What happens to you now?" "I don't know. Depends on the hearings. On whether the court decides I broke the law or whether what I did was legitimate." "It was legitimate. Anyone with eyes can see that." "The law doesn't always care what people with eyes can see." "Then the law's stupid." Wren smiled. "Sometimes, yes. But it's what we've got." The property hearing came first. The courthouse in Timber Creek was a modest building, packed to capacity with people who'd come to watch. Wren saw familiar faces from the ranch, townspeople who'd known her father, and plenty of curious strangers. Thomas Garrett sat at one table with 2 lawyers in expensive suits. He was a large man, well-dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He didn't look at Wren when she entered. Fletcher and Harrison, the ranch's lawyer, sat at the other table. Wren sat behind them, trying to look calm while her heart hammered against her ribs. The judge was an older man named Thornton, gray-haired and stern-faced. He called the hearing to order and reviewed the case briefly. "Mr. Hadley challenges the validity of a property deed executed 7 years ago," Thornton said. "The deed in question transfers 500 acres from Thomas Garrett to Fletcher Hadley.
Mr. Hadley claims the property was never legitimately Mr. Garrett's to sell. Mr. Garrett, your response? One of Garrett's lawyers stood. Your Honor, my client purchased that land from the previous owner, Elias Voss, 6 months before Mr. Voss's tragic death. The sale was legal and properly documented. We have the deed of sale, properly signed and witnessed. Let me see it. The lawyer produced a document. The judge examined it carefully. This shows Elias Voss selling to Thomas Garrett for $3,000, dated 7 years ago, 6 months before the fire. Witnessed by... Thornton looked up. Witnessed by 2 men whose signatures are illegible. Are these witnesses available to testify? Unfortunately, no, Your Honor. One has since passed away. The other moved out of territory, and we've been unable to locate him.
How convenient. Harrison stood. Your Honor, we have documentation proving this deed is fraudulent. Elias Voss kept meticulous records of all his transactions. We have his ledger, his correspondence, his original property deeds. There is no record anywhere of a sale to Mr. Garrett. In fact, Harrison produced the letters Wren had found. We have multiple letters from Mr. Garrett attempting to purchase this land, with Mr. Voss refusing each time. The last letter is dated 8 months before the fire. Mr. Voss's final recorded position was that the land was not for sale at any price.
Garrett's lawyer objected. Letters expressing intent to buy don't prove a sale didn't eventually happen. True, Harrison agreed, but the complete absence of any documentation from the seller does. Elias Voss documented every property transaction he ever made, sales, purchases, even lease agreements. There are records going back 15 years. The eastern pasture appears in his ledger as purchase property, paid in full, never sold. If he'd sold it to Mr. Garrett, there would be a record. There isn't. The judge looked at Garrett. Mr. Garrett, do you have a bill of sale, receipt of payment? Any documentation beyond this deed showing the transaction actually occurred? Garrett shifted in his seat. The bill of sale was lost in the fire that killed Mr. Voss and destroyed his property? Yes, Your Honor. Tragic timing, but convenient timing, you mean? The judge's expression had gone cold. You produce a deed of sale for property that the owner repeatedly refused to sell, dated just months before the owner died under suspicious circumstances, with no supporting documentation and witnesses who are conveniently unavailable. Do you understand how this looks? Your Honor, I assure you. You assure me nothing, Mr. Garrett. I'm looking at the evidence, and the evidence suggests fraud. Thornton turned to Harrison. Do you have Mr. Voss's original deed for the eastern pasture? We do, Your Honor. Harrison produced it. Purchased from Helen Patterson 9 years ago. Clean title, properly filed. No encumbrances, no record of any subsequent sale. The judge examined both deeds carefully, comparing signatures and dates. The courtroom waited in tense silence. Finally, Thornton spoke. The court finds significant irregularities in Mr. Garrett's deed of sale. The signature attributed to Elias Voss does not match the signature on his original purchase deed. The witnesses cannot be produced. No supporting documentation exists. And the timing, immediately before the seller's death, is highly suspicious. Garrett's lawyer started to object, but Thornton cut him off. Furthermore, the court notes that Elias Voss's documented refusal to sell, combined with his meticulous record-keeping, strongly suggests this deed is fraudulent. I am therefore ruling that the sale from Voss to Garrett is void. The property reverts to the Voss estate. The courtroom erupted in noise. Garrett surged to his feet, face red with fury. This is outrageous. I paid good money. If you paid anything, show me proof, Thornton snapped. Otherwise, sit down and be quiet before I hold you in contempt. Garrett's lawyers pulled him back into his seat, whispering urgently. The judge continued. The property will revert to Elias Voss's heir. Miss Voss, please stand. Wren stood on shaking legs. You are Elias Voss's daughter and sole heir? Yes, Your Honor. Then as of this moment, the eastern pasture is yours. Mr. Hadley? Thornton looked at Fletcher. You purchased the land in good faith from Mr. Garrett. You're not at fault here, but the land was never legitimately his to sell. Do you understand? I do, Your Honor, Fletcher said. And I have no problem with your ruling. The land should be Miss Voss's. Very good. This hearing is concluded. Miss Voss, my clerk will prepare the necessary documents transferring the title to your name. Mr. Garrett, If you have any further objections, file them in writing. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down. Wren stood frozen as people surged around her. Fletcher gripping her shoulder, Harrison shaking her hand, townspeople congratulating her. Across the room, Garrett stared at her with undisguised hatred before his lawyers hustled him out. She'd won. 7 years after losing everything, she'd just won back a piece of it. Outside the courthouse, Fletcher said, "That land's worth something. Good grazing, decent water. You could sell it, make enough money to start over anywhere you want." "I don't want to sell it." "No? It's my father's legacy. I'm not letting it go." Wren looked at him. "But I don't know the first thing about ranching." Fletcher smiled slightly. "Lucky for you, I do. And the eastern pasture borders my land. We could work something out. Partnership, maybe. You provide the land, I provide the expertise, split the profits." "You do that?" "You saved my son's life. I think I can help you figure out how to use your inheritance." Wren felt something in her chest loosen. "Thank you. Thank me by not selling to some speculator who'll ruin the grazing. That land's part of this valley. Should stay that way." They rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence. Wren kept thinking about her father's letter, about being braver than he'd been, about standing tall instead of hiding. She'd faced Garrett in court and won. Now she just had to face the medical board. That hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later, but the day before it was set to happen, something unexpected arrived, a letter from the Territorial Medical Board delivered by courier. Fletcher opened it in his office with Wren and Gideon present. He read it twice, then looked up with an expression Wren couldn't quite read. "What does it say?" she asked. "The board has reviewed the complaint against you. They've also reviewed the investigators' reports and interviewed multiple witnesses." Fletcher paused. "They're dismissing the charges." Wren's heart stopped. "What?" "Listen to this. While Miss Voss lacks formal medical credentials, the board finds no evidence of harm to the patient. On the contrary, the patient has shown remarkable improvement under her care. The board notes that Miss Voss did not claim to be a licensed physician, did not charge for her services, and acted with the full knowledge and consent of the patient and his guardian. Furthermore, the board recognizes that folk healing traditions have value and should not be criminalized when practiced responsibly and with consent. The complaint is dismissed. No further action will be taken." Gideon whooped. Wren sat down hard in the nearest chair. "They're not charging me?" "They're not charging you. You're free. Clear." "But Mercer can be angry all he wants. The board ruled in your favor. It's over." It didn't feel over. It felt like waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to change their mind, for everything to fall apart the way it always had before. But Fletcher was grinning, and Gideon was celebrating, and the letter in Fletcher's hands was real and official and said she was in the clear. Maybe, Wren thought, maybe good things could actually last. Maybe she could finally stop running. The celebration lasted exactly one evening before reality set back in. Wren woke the next morning to the same small room, the same pre-dawn darkness, the same weight of uncertainty about what came next. Winning didn't erase 7 years of running. It didn't automatically teach her how to stay in one place, how to trust that good things wouldn't vanish the moment she stopped watching for danger. She dressed and went to the kitchen out of habit, started the coffee, even though she was no longer just the cook. Maria found her there, standing at the stove, staring at nothing. "You look like someone who just lost a fight, not won one," Maria said. "I don't know what to do now." "What do you want to do?" Wren turned to face her. "I have no idea. For 7 years I've been focused on surviving, moving, staying invisible. Now I've got land I don't know how to work, a cleared name I don't know how to use, and people who think I'm some kind of miracle worker when all I did was remember what my father taught me. That's more than most people do with what they're given." Maria started pulling out flour for biscuits. "Your father gave you knowledge. You used it. You helped a boy everyone else had abandoned. That's not nothing. It's not enough either." "Enough for what?" "I don't know. That's the problem." Wren poured herself coffee, burnt her tongue on the first sip like always. "I spent so long just trying to get through each day. I never thought past that, never planned for what happens if things actually work out. So start thinking now." Maria's hands worked the dough with practiced efficiency. "You've got options. That's more than most people have. Figure out what you want and go after it." What did she want? The question felt foreign. Want implied choice, implied a future that wasn't just about avoiding the past. Fletcher appeared in the doorway before she could answer. "We need to talk about the land." They sat in his office, maps spread across the desk. The eastern pasture was marked in faded ink, 500 acres running along a creek with good water and decent grazing. "Here's what I'm thinking," Fletcher said. "You don't know ranching. I do. Your land border's mine, shares the same water source. Makes sense to run them together. We could formalize the partnership I mentioned. You lease the land to me, I run cattle on it. We split the profits 60-40 in your favor since it's your land." "That's generous." "It's fair. I'm doing the work, but you're providing the resource, or—" Fletcher paused. "There's another option. You could learn the business. Work the land yourself, build something of your own. I'd help you get started, teach you what you need to know. Harder path. But it'd be yours." Wren studied the map. 500 acres. A legacy her father had died protecting. Land that could support cattle, could generate income, could be something real and permanent instead of temporary and borrowed. "I don't know if I'm capable of that, building something from nothing." "You just helped my son walk again. I think you can figure out cattle ranching." "That's different. I knew what I was doing with Gideon. I had my father's knowledge. This is scary," Fletcher finished. "It's scary because it means putting down roots, committing to something, trusting that it won't get ripped away." Wren met his eyes. "You understand. My wife died 6 years ago, cancer. Took 18 months from diagnosis to the end. After she was gone, I thought about selling everything, starting over somewhere else where nothing reminded me of her. You know why I didn't?" "Why?" "Because she loved this place. She built it with me. And running away from the pain would have meant abandoning everything she'd worked for. So I stayed, kept the ranch going, raised Gideon alone even when I had no idea what I was doing. And you know what? Some days it was awful, some days I couldn't get out of bed, but I stayed, and eventually it got easier." "What if it doesn't get easier for me?" "Then you deal with it anyway. That's what staying means." Gideon appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt. Wren, there's someone here to see you." "Who?" "He says his name is Vincent Mercer, the doctor's son." Wren exchanged a look with Fletcher. "What does he want?" "Wouldn't say. Just asked for you specifically." She found him waiting on the porch, a young man, mid-20s, with his father's features but lacking the older Mercer's rigid arrogance. He stood when she approached. "Miss Voss, thank you for seeing me." "What do you want?" "To apologize. For my father." Vincent Mercer looked uncomfortable. "He's been spreading rumors in town, calling you a fraud, saying the medical board was wrong to dismiss the charges. He's making your name into something ugly." "And you came here to tell me this?" "I came here to tell you he's wrong, and to say I'm sorry." Vincent pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I'm a physician too, trained in Boston, just returned last month to join my father's practice. He asked me to review his notes on the Hadley case. When I did, I realized—" He paused. "Miss Voss, your methods might be unconventional, but they worked. The patient recovered function that multiple physicians, including my father, said was impossible. That deserves recognition, not condemnation." Wren took the envelope. "What's this?" "A letter, stating my professional opinion that your treatment of Gideon Hadley was effective and appropriate. I've sent copies to the Territorial Medical Board and the local newspaper. I can't make my father stop his campaign against you, but I can at least provide a counterpoint from someone with actual credentials." "Why would you do this?" "He's your father. He's also wrong. And being wrong while harming someone's reputation is worse than being wrong quietly." Vincent met her eyes. "My father's a good doctor in many ways, but he's stubborn. He can't accept that his diagnosis was incorrect. He's making that your problem when it should be his. That's not right." Wren opened the envelope and scanned the letter. It was formal, professionally worded, and unambiguous in its support of her methods. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome. And Miss Voss, if you ever consider teaching others what you know, I'd like to learn. What you did with pressure therapy and thermal treatment, that's not taught in any medical school I attended. But it should be." He left before she could respond. Fletcher had been listening from inside. "Well, didn't see that coming." "Neither did I. The son's got more sense than the father. That letter will help. Public opinion matters, especially in a small territory like this." I don't care about public opinion. You should, because if you're building something here, reputation matters. People need to trust you. Fletcher smiled slightly. Besides, sounds like you just got your first student. Young Dr. Mercer wants to learn from you. The idea felt absurd. Teaching someone with actual medical training? But Wren thought about her father's letter, about carrying forward knowledge that the schools ignored. Maybe that's what staying meant, not just existing in one place, but contributing to it, teaching, sharing, building something larger than herself. I don't know how to teach, she said. You taught Gideon how to walk again. Start there. Over the next weeks, Wren settled into a routine that felt less like survival and more like living. She worked with Fletcher to understand the basics of ranching, how to assess grazing land, how to calculate carrying capacity, how cattle markets worked. It was overwhelming at first, an entirely new vocabulary and set of skills. But she learned. Slowly, imperfectly. But she learned. Vincent Mercer returned twice more, asking questions about her treatment methods, taking notes. The second time, he brought a patient, a young woman who'd injured her shoulder in a fall and wasn't responding to conventional treatment. Wren worked with her for an hour, showing Vincent the pressure points and movement patterns her father had taught her. 2 weeks later, the woman's shoulder had regained full range of motion. Word spread. People started showing up at the ranch asking for help with injuries, chronic pain, problems their doctors hadn't been able to solve. Wren saw them in the evenings, after ranch work was done. She didn't charge money. That felt wrong, felt like inviting the accusations of practicing medicine for profit. But people left eggs, preserves, firewood, small gifts in exchange for treatment. Fletcher watched this development with amusement. You're building a practice whether you meant to or not. I'm just helping people. That's what a practice is. Maria was more direct. You need to formalize this. Set hours. Make it official. Otherwise, people will show up at all hours expecting immediate help. I don't want to be official. That's what got me in trouble with Mercer. Mercer's trouble is his own stubbornness. You've got the medical board's approval and his son's endorsement. You're legitimate whether you feel like it or not. Wren wasn't sure she'd ever feel legitimate, but she started keeping regular hours, Tuesday and Thursday evenings, the barn's tack room converted into a treatment space. People came. She helped when she could, referred to Vincent Mercer when she couldn't. Slowly, imperfectly, a pattern emerged. A life that wasn't about running or hiding or just getting through. Gideon recovered completely. By autumn, he was working the ranch full-time, riding fence lines and handling cattle like he'd never been injured. Sometimes Wren would watch him from a distance and feel something like pride mixed with disbelief. That boy who'd been trapped in a wheelchair, who'd given up hope, he was whole again. One evening, she found him sitting on the porch watching the sunset. "Can I join you?" she asked. "Sure." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Gideon said, "I've been thinking about what I want to do, long term." "And?" "Dad wants me to take over the ranch eventually, and I will probably, but I also want to help people the way you helped me." He glanced at her. "I've been talking to Vincent Mercer. He thinks I could train as a physician's assistant. Learn enough to help with basic treatment, work alongside actual doctors, but also learn your methods. Bridge the gap between what the schools teach and what your father knew." That's ambitious. So was walking again. Didn't stop me. Wren smiled. "No, it didn't. You think you can handle medical training? I think I can handle anything after spending 3 years in that chair. Worst thing that happens is I fail. I've survived worse than failure. Then you should try." "You think so?" "I think you spent 3 years stuck in one place. Now you've got your life back. Use it for something that matters." Gideon nodded slowly. "That's what I'm trying to do. Use it, not waste it." After he went inside, Wren stayed on the porch watching darkness settle over the valley. The ranch was quiet except for distant cattle sounds and wind through the grass. Peaceful in a way she'd forgotten things could be peaceful. She thought about her father's letter, about being braver than he'd been, about not hiding. She'd done that. Had stood in court and faced the man who'd stolen her inheritance. Had treated a patient everyone said was hopeless and proved them wrong. Had stayed when every instinct screamed to run. That was something. Maybe not everything, maybe not perfect, but something real. Winter came early that year,
first snow falling in October. Wren stood in the yard of what was now legally her property, the eastern pasture, and watched white cover the land her father had died protecting. Fletcher had helped her file the paperwork, had shown her the boundary markers, had explained what the land could support. It was hers. Actually, legally, permanently hers. The weight of that ownership felt strange. She'd spent so long owning nothing but what fit in a knapsack that having 500 acres felt impossible, like a trick that would be revealed any moment. But the deed was real. The land was real. And standing here in falling snow, watching her breath fog in cold air, Wren finally let herself believe it might last. Fletcher rode up, leading a spare horse. Thought you might want to see the whole property. Get a sense of what you've got.
They rode the boundaries together, Fletcher pointing out landmarks and explaining grazing patterns. The land was beautiful in a harsh way, creek running through the center, rolling hills on the eastern edge, good grass even under the snow. Your father chose well, Fletcher said. This is quality range, water's reliable, soil's decent. You could run 100 head here easily. I don't have 100 head, not yet. But we could work out a deal. I provide the cattle, you provide the land. Split the increase. In a few years, you'd have your own herd. You'd trust me with that? You saved my son. I think I can trust you with cattle. They rode back as sunset painted the snow orange and pink. At the ranch, Maria had supper ready, and Gideon was arguing with one of the hands about something trivial. Normal sounds, normal life. Wren dismounted and stood for a moment, taking it in. This place, these people, this life she hadn't planned but had somehow built anyway. You all right? Fletcher asked. Yeah, just thinking. About? About staying, really staying, not just for a season or until trouble comes, actually putting down roots. That's good thinking. It's terrifying thinking. That too. Fletcher headed toward the barn, then paused. Wren, you don't have to decide everything right now. You can just be here. Let the rest figure itself out as it goes. That night, Wren pulled out her father's journal and the documentation she'd been keeping of her treatments. 2 generations of knowledge, carefully recorded. She'd been adding to it, notes on patients she'd seen, techniques that worked, observations about healing that her father hadn't documented. She was building something, not just living or surviving, actually building. A practice, a reputation, a life. It wasn't perfect. Some patients didn't improve, some treatments failed. She still woke up some mornings expecting to find everything gone, still had nightmares about fire and loss. But she was here, still here, and that had to count for something. Months passed. Winter settled deep, then broke. Spring came with mud and new calves and the endless work of keeping a ranch running. Wren learned to ride better, to recognize sick cattle, to fix fence and mend tack. She learned the rhythms of the land and the patterns of the seasons. She also kept treating patients. More came as word spread. People with injuries, chronic conditions, problems that conventional medicine couldn't solve. She helped when she could. Vincent Mercer started sending patients to her, calling it complementary treatment. They developed an informal partnership. He handled acute medical emergencies. She handled rehabilitation and chronic pain. Even old Dr. Mercer eventually quieted his campaign against her. He never apologized, never acknowledged he'd been wrong. But he stopped spreading rumors. That was enough. By summer, Wren had 30 head of cattle on her land. Fletcher's investment, their partnership formalized in writing. The cattle bore both their brands, profit would be split. It was real and legal and binding. She was a rancher now, a healer, a landowner. All the things she'd never imagined being when she'd arrived at Hadley Ranch with nothing but a wool-wrapped bundle and a father's journal. One evening, she stood at the fence line between her property and Fletcher's, watching the sun set over land that belonged to her. Gideon walked up beside her. Thinking deep thoughts? He asked. Thinking about how strange life is, how it changes when you're not looking. Good strange or bad strange? Good. Mostly good. She glanced at him. You leave for your training next month. Yeah, Vincent arranged for me to study with a physician in Denver. 2 years, then I can come back and work here, help people the way you helped me. You nervous? Terrified. But the good kind of terrified. The kind that means something matters.
Gideon leaned on the fence. You taught me that. That being scared doesn't mean you can't do something, just means it's worth doing. I didn't teach you that. You figured it out yourself. Maybe, but you showed me it was possible. They stood in comfortable silence, watching cattle graze and shadows lengthen across the valley. Thank you, Gideon said quietly, for not giving up on me, for breaking my father's rule, for being stubborn enough to try when everyone said it was pointless. You did the work. You're the one who fought to get better. We both fought. That's what made it work. Fletcher joined them, carrying 3 tin cups and a bottle of whiskey. Figured this moment deserved a drink. What moment? Wren asked. The one where we acknowledge that things turned out all right. Against all odds and contrary to expectations, things actually turned out all right. Fletcher poured 3 measures. To stubbornness, to fighting when the smart thing would be to quit, and to people who refused to accept the impossible. They drank. The whiskey burned, but in a good way. I've got news, Fletcher said. The territorial legislature is considering a new law. Would create a licensing category for traditional healers, people who practice folk medicine with documented results. Vincent's father is fighting it, but Vincent and some younger physicians are supporting it. If it passes, you'd be able to practice legally, officially. Wren absorbed this. How likely is it to pass? Harrison thinks 50-50, but the fact they're considering it at all is progress. People are starting to recognize that different kinds of knowledge have value. My father would have liked that. He'd have been proud of you, of what you've built here. Wren thought about her father's letter about being braver than he'd been, about standing tall. She'd done that. Had stood in court and faced her father's killer, had defended her methods against doctors who thought credentials mattered more than results, had helped a boy walk when everyone said it was impossible. She'd done more than survive. She'd actually lived. You know what I realized, she said. I spent 7 years running because I thought staying meant getting hurt again, losing again. But running, that was losing every single day, losing the chance to build something, to matter to someone, to actually have a life instead of just avoiding death. And now? Fletcher asked. Now I'm staying, really staying, building a life here, teaching what I know to people who want to learn, working this land my father died protecting. She looked at both of them. I'm done running. This is home now. Gideon grinned. Fletcher nodded approval. Good, Fletcher said, because Maria's been planning a wedding and you're invited. Whose wedding? Jacob Warren's daughter. Remember Jacob, the ranch hand who defended you in court? His daughter's marrying one of the hands from the next ranch over. Big celebration. Whole valley's invited. Maria's been cooking for 3 days. When? Next week. You'll come? Wren thought about it. A celebration, a gathering, being visible and known instead of invisible and forgotten. A year ago, the idea would have terrified her. Now it just felt right. Yeah, she said, I'll come. The wedding was everything Maria had promised. Loud, chaotic, joyful. Half the valley showed up, including people Wren had treated and people who'd known her father. They welcomed her not as a stranger, but as someone who belonged. Someone with a place and a name and a future. She danced badly, drank too much of the punch someone had spiked, and laughed until her sides hurt. Gideon introduced her to friends his age, and they treated her like someone interesting instead of someone suspicious. Vincent Mercer showed up with a woman he introduced as his fiancée, a schoolteacher from Denver. I've been telling Clara about your work, Vincent said. She's interested in documenting traditional healing methods. Thinks there should be a written record for future generations. Like a textbook? Wren asked. More like a field guide, practical knowledge, case studies, techniques that work. Would you be interested in contributing? Wren thought about her father's journal, about generations of knowledge passed down, about making sure it didn't die with her. Yes, she said. I'd be interested. As the celebration wound down and people started heading home, Fletcher found Wren standing at the edge of the crowd. You look happy, he said. I am. That's weird, right? Being happy? Not weird, just unfamiliar. You'll get used to it. I hope so. Fletcher pulled an envelope from his pocket. Speaking of getting used to things, this came today. Thought you should have it before the celebration distracted everyone. Wren opened the envelope and found official-looking papers. She scanned them, then read them again more carefully. This is the deed to the eastern pasture, but it's in your name,
Completely. No partnership, no lease. Just yours. Fletcher smiled at her expression. I told you when this started that if the land was your father's, it should be yours. I meant it. Harrison filed the transfer paperwork last week. It's official now. Fletcher, I can't. You can, and you will. That land is your inheritance, your legacy. What you do with it is your business, but it's yours, free and clear. Wren stared at the papers. 500 acres. Legally hers. No conditions, no debt, no strings attached. Thank you, she managed. Thank you for saving my son, for being stubborn enough to break the rules when breaking them was the right thing to do. Fletcher squeezed her shoulder. Welcome home, Wren. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing there with tears on her face and a deed in her hands and the overwhelming realization that she'd finally found what she'd been running from for 7 years. A place to belong. People who mattered. A future that wasn't just about avoiding the past. She'd stopped running, and in stopping, she'd found something worth staying for. Autumn came again, marking a year since Wren had first walked onto Hadley Ranch with everything she owned in a wool blanket. The valley turned gold and red, cattle were moved to winter pasture, and the land prepared itself for cold months ahead. Wren stood on her property, and looked across 500 acres of possibility. Fletcher had helped her build a small cabin there, just 2 rooms, but solid and weatherproof. A place of her own. She'd moved in last week, and the space still felt too large, too permanent. But she was learning to trust permanence. To trust that walls wouldn't burn, that land wouldn't be stolen, that the life she'd built wouldn't vanish. Gideon came by on his last day before leaving for Denver. He'd packed light, clothes, books, his mother's watch that Fletcher had given him, ready for whatever came next. You'll be all right here? He asked. I'll be fine. You'll be all right there? Probably. If I'm not, I'll come home. That's the good part about having a home to come back to. They stood together watching the sun set over the valley, both of them thinking about how much had changed in a year. I've been thinking about something, Gideon said. About what happened. About the rule my father made. That you shouldn't go near me. That rule that you broke. What about it? It was the right rule to break. Not all rules are. Some exist for good reasons, but that rule came from fear and grief and giving up. Breaking it saved my life. He looked at her. I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you for knowing the difference, for being wise enough to see when a rule was wrong. I wasn't wise. I was just stubborn. You were both. And I'm grateful. After he left, Wren sat on the porch of her cabin and watched stars emerge. The valley was quiet except for wind and distant cattle sounds, peaceful in a way that no longer felt fragile or temporary. She thought about rules and when to break them, about standing your ground when everyone says you should run, about the difference between survival and living. Her father had taught her to heal. The world had taught her to hide, and somewhere between those 2 lessons, she'd learned something else. That being invisible kept you safe, but staying visible, being known, putting down roots, that's what gave life meaning. She'd been invisible for 7 years. Had survived, yes, but hadn't truly lived. Now she was visible, known, rooted, and she'd never been more alive. Winter settled over the valley like a promise kept. Snow covered the land, cattle huddled in sheltered draws, and smoke rose from chimneys across the territory. Wren treated patients in her cabin, consulted with Vincent Mercer on difficult cases, and learned the rhythm of seasons on land that belonged to her. Fletcher stopped by regularly, ostensibly to check on the cattle, but really to make sure she was all right. Maria sent food, too much food always, with notes about gossip and news from town. People she'd helped came by with gifts, with thank yous, with requests for more help. She belonged now. To this place, to these people, to this life she'd built from nothing but stubbornness and her father's knowledge. It wasn't perfect. Some days were hard. Some nights, she still woke from nightmares about fire. Some moments, she expected everything to fall apart. But those moments came less often now. And when they did, she had people to remind her that she wasn't running anymore, that she'd found something worth fighting for, worth staying for, worth building a life around. On the shortest day of winter, Wren stood at her father's grave, unmarked for 7 years, now marked with a simple stone she'd commissioned. The eastern pasture spread behind it, land he'd protected with his life. I did it, Dad, she said quietly.
I stopped running. I fought for what you left me. I used what you taught me. I helped people the way you always wanted me to. She touched the stone. I hope you're proud. I hope wherever you are, you know that your legacy didn't die with you. It's alive, growing, making a difference. The wind answered, cold and sharp and clean. Wren turned and walked back toward her cabin, toward the smoke rising from her chimney, toward the life she'd built. She didn't look back, didn't need to. The past was honored, the present was secure, and the future. The future belonged to people brave enough to act when no one else would, people who broke the rules that needed breaking, people who refused to accept that broken things couldn't be made whole. She'd been that person once, in desperation and stubbornness. Now she chose to be that person deliberately, daily, without apology. The woman with nothing left to lose had become the woman who'd found everything worth keeping. And this time, she wasn't letting go.